Hi, guys, and welcome back to COR Meets World. Today we have a very special guest, Adolfo Alvarez, originally from Sinaloa in Guerrero, Mexico. Adolfo is a third year student at UNC Chapel Hill, double majoring in global studies and media and journalism. Fun fact, he was recently elected as the 2025-2026 student body president for UNC Chapel Hill. Welcome, Adolfo.
Thank you, Corey, for having me. It's great to be around, and always great to have platforms like this where we can talk about what does it mean to be in this really important role I'm about to enter. So yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's always great to see what you do with this podcast. So really honored to be around.
Of course, of course. And I was actually so pleasantly surprised when Adolfo said that he liked Core Meets World because I was like, wait, what? Like you like the podcast. So that was really exciting. And it's really an honor to have you on here, to have you on Core Meets World as the new student body president. Like I was telling Adolfo before, I actually, one of my very first guests was our previous student body president, Jalea Taylor, who did amazing things. And now I'm so excited to have you on as our new student body president. So yeah, it's truly an honor to have you on. And just to kick us off, like aside from the student body president stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into, and I'm sure it's been a lot, recently with campaigning and then winning the election and all the hard work that went into it. Before we get into all of that stuff, can you just tell us like about you? Who is Adolfo?
Yeah, of course. So like you said, I'm a third year here. I'm in the husband school, and I have an orange cat. So I think that's a good thing to say. I have an orange cat and an orange hamster as well.
Mhm.
Trying to work on them getting along. It's a work in progress, but um, I came to UNC from Mexico. So I immigrated to the US when I was 16 years old. I moved to Arizona, and then from Arizona I came to college. But yeah, UNC has been great. I think that I've been able to find a lot of community. A lot of people know me for doing Model UN. That's like been my
Mhm.
thing at Carolina, and before UNC, I did that a lot. And I'm kind of letting go of Model UN for the presidency. So definitely a lot of changes
Mhm.
happening. Ending pretty much all of my extracurricular involvement outside of being student body president, which
Mhm.
it's kind of like a bittersweet, like kind of going into bigger things. But yeah, I've been involved in university development work. So I've worked
Mhm.
with donor engagement and the part of the
Mm.
university that works to raise funds for different scholarships and programs at the university. I've gone to work with that. Give UNC happens on Tuesday. I've been
Right.
able to work with the team that puts together Give UNC. And so I've interned with them, and yeah, I think I've done pretty much a little bit of everything. I've managed the ambassadors program of the Husman School
Oh,
here at Carolina, so I'm vice president of that. And I've also worked for Be Real on their marketing,
nice.
on their student marketing engagement side.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And I like how diverse your experiences seem. But after being someone who like followed your campaign from the beginning, it seems like they all led you to this moment and for this position. Because one thing that remained true throughout all of those experiences, I think, is passion in some way. Like it was you weren't just doing things because you thought it would build your resume or whatever the case may be. It seems like all of your experiences were rooted in passion and just being genuine. And I think that's really was the key to what differentiated you. Like you went up against amazing candidates, like very qualified candidates, but the difference was you seemed so genuine, so authentic, and you had a goal, and you led your campaign with passion. And I think that's definitely what got my vote. And I think probably most of the university's vote was the passion and the authenticity. So that was really nice to see because I think a lot of times, not just with student government and like university politics, but politics on a global scale and a national scale, like the thing that it lacks is like authenticity and people being genuine and like doing things for the greater good, not for yourself. And I think that's what we liked, and that's why you're here. And I'm so excited to see how you lead this presidency and your administration moving forward with that in mind. So now I guess is a good time to transition into that piece. So, like you said before, you were big into Model UN, coming into Carolina. And I'm really curious to know, I guess, like, At what point did you know, okay, this is my responsibility. I need to step up and I need to take this role on. Like the university needs me. That kind of call. When did that happen?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to when I came into the university. So I came into this country, and um I was an emancipated minor, struggled a lot to afford normal life in Arizona, and then
Hmm.
UNC extended the opportunity of coming here with a full ride scholarship, which I
Hmm.
really appreciated. I think
Hmm.
that um in some way, the university was giving me everything I needed to have a quality education, and
Hmm.
that's a not so common opportunity in the United States. I think here among the Carolina community, we can hear it to be more common, but
Right.
like in the United States, you go around, and most people do not get to have this.
Hmm.
So I definitely acknowledge the privilege of that. And I always said that I wanted to give back, that there had to be an opportunity to give back to the university, which is kind of
Right.
like what I started doing throughout years. Model UN put my heart into it. Our conference ranked fifth in the world after I led it,
Hmm.
and that was a great ranking to bring back to the university and give
Right.
people um a sense of belonging. I think sometimes my main goal leading that conference was that sometimes people it's really easy to feel like you're not doing much during college. It's really easy to
Right.
feel like you're not having meaningful involvement, or your
Right.
accomplishments are not mirroring other people's accomplishments. So I
Right.
wanted to give something to people that they could go out and say, I was part of the world's
Hmm.
fifth best conference, and I was a proud staff member. So how
Right.
can we give back to a community? And in November, that question came up.
Hmm.
It's very difficult times. I was um in Washington. We went to a conference up there, and then I had left the White House that day, and we were talking about UNC in general, like the country. It was 3 days before the election, so
Hmm.
we knew that there was a high chance that things could not swing the way that we all wanted. So,
Right.
like, what's gonna happen after that? Like, what's
Hmm.
gonna happen to education? What's gonna happen to
Hmm.
diversity programs in general? The university, I think, the administration's been going into a direction that's pretty disappointing for most of the student bodies. So
Yeah.
how can we respond to that with governance that steps up and represents students? How can
Hmm.
we do better? I think that
Right.
was the overall question, and I think that the current student government has an amazing job. In
Hmm.
frankly, I think they've had really great accomplishments. I think
Yeah.
Jalea and her administration have really advocating for student wellness,
Hmm.
and my idea was more like, how can we bring a first perspective
Right.
to challenge the way things have always been done. I think that
Yeah.
that was the main thing. How can we get rid of this is how it's done,
Hmm.
and look into, okay, they've done it this way, and this part is great, but how can we change the smaller things to make sure
Right.
that we are integrating more voices into student governance?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there was a phone call. I called some friends, and that was a Saturday night, and then
Hmm.
Monday morning we were meeting to start putting together the campaign. It was a huge team that we had to recruit and start to get the policy done. Most people decide they're running traditionally around April. I know Kennedy decided that they were running in April of
Hmm.
like the year before, so you definitely have a
Ooh.
lot of time. I decided
Yeah.
in November, so it was just the right amount of time, but you
Yeah.
had to get to work to
Right.
get all your policy and everything else done.
Right. Ah, that's amazing. And like the fact that you started so late, but then your campaign was so impactful. Like, could you talk about that team? So, like you said, you had to recruit people to join that team, but I'm sure it had to be so strong. It had to be strong. It had to be cohesive. What did that look like? And what was it about that team or those specific people you had around you that made it possible?
Yeah, so I was an outsider. So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to outsource people from student government, because I wasn't part of that community at that point. So
Right.
it had to be people who I knew would be able to catch up on what does it take to win a
Mm-hmm.
presidency, what does it take to do student government, but also what does it take to care.
Right.
Like, if I'm able to brief you on why I'm running, like,
Mm-hmm.
can you get on the same track, and can we build like a cohesive campaign? Because I mean, at the end of the day, I can have a passion, but not everyone's going to have the same rhetoric. I think it's
Right.
more like you have to try to recruit people that will be on the same page with you on
Mm-hmm.
this issue. So I went on that. My campaign managers, my policy team, my field team, like people who I knew were going to also recruit people that
Yeah.
cared.
Yeah.
I think that in student government, and in general, in positions like this where you're going for bureaucratic positions,
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to maybe go up to someone and be like, well, if I win, I am going to give you X and Y position. Like
Right.
you're going to be the director of this. And I
Mhm.
did not want to go with that route.
Right.
I wanted to have people who, first of all, cared about the change in student government. And then we'll
Mhm.
go through an application process to fill all the spots that come after that. But
Right.
how can we recruit people without being conditional? You know, how can we
Right.
recruit people? And so I recruited my friends and I recruited people who I knew cared about me a lot. And
Mhm.
most of my campaign team is actually not going to be involved in my administration.
Wow.
They're not interested in student government. It's
Yeah.
not their track. But you know, we had people that week that we declared candidacy, we were collecting signatures, which we recorded. We broke record. We in 72 hours we got the 1,200 signatures.
Wow.
We got to 1,400. So it was a week that was like 15-degree weather, and
Yeah.
like we were there at 9 a.m. The pens were freezing. Like
Mhm.
the pens were literally frozen. The ink would literally not work. So we had people
Wow.
with like 3, 4 pens, and they had to swap them in their pockets so they
Yeah.
were warm up. And all those people were pretty much there because they cared
Mhm.
about my mission and they care about me. So I think
Yeah.
that a pretty good lesson that I got to understand is that people will look out for you and people will come out and support your
Mhm.
mission if you take the time to get to know them, to connect with
Right.
them genuinely. And if they know you as a person, they know that you're running on that same platform that makes you you, they'll
Mhm.
be more than willing to help you write policy, to help you be out there in the cold, to tell their friends, to really take the time to help you out. So that was
Right.
really great to see.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, and that goes back to that original point about being genuine, like you said. Like, I feel like a lot of times with these positions, and especially at a university like UNC, it can be very easy to fall into the, oh, what am I going to get out of this? How is this going to build my resume? How is this going to benefit me? But I think the big difference with your campaign was you looked at how can I do things to benefit the Carolina community, and you kept emphasizing that. But it was, and everyone does, but when you said it, I was like, oh, like, I could read your words, and like I remember the original post where you like announced your campaign. Like, I was just like, oh wow, like this one's different. Like, you could tell just by like the passion behind the words, those things, that there was something different about it, and drawing on that, could you talk just a little bit about what your plans are? So the policy behind it, what do you see in this next year for not only Carolina, but your entire administration? Like, what is your goal, I would say? And you can touch on the policies specific.
Yeah, of course. So, I think there are two goals. I think one of them is the advocacy piece, and the other one
Mm,
is the policy piece. I think
mhm.
that we can't deny that it's going to be a tough year at the university. It's going to be a tough year nationally, so that we do
Mhm.
have that big weight on what's happening with um sorry, with overall policies. You know, so
Mhm.
we have the federal government trying to dismantle the Department of Education. We
Right.
have the attack on research and diversity programs across the
Yeah.
country. And in general, there's a trend for that's coming after free speech. And
Mm.
and the federal government, the White House, says higher education as an enemy.
Right.
So they see education as an enemy.
Mhm.
And
And I
and
wonder
they
why that is.
and I really do
Yeah.
wonder, really wonder why that is. And I do agree that in an unpartisan perspective, regardless on
Mhm.
what side of um, this administration you are, I think that
Mhm.
it's a very fair claim to make that they're coming after education because they see it
Yeah,
as an enemy.
they are.
And so that's very concerning, you know, because
Mhm.
we also do have an administration that is not providing a lot of answers as to what is this going to mean for the Carolina community,
Yeah.
and I think that that's the main thing. How can we advocate for more clarity and lay the ground for people to know more about what university, state, and federal policies will mean for them? You know, for example, I think that a student government could do a lot more of a proactive job at that.
Mm.
Like, you
Mhm.
know, you do get to be in these really big rooms where you get to get a preview of what university policies will look like. You do get to
Right.
meet with administrators and ask them about um, how things are going to affect them. For example, the DEI
Mhm.
repeal. I talked to a
Yeah.
lot of organizations on campus that told me like, well, you know, I think that student government could have been a little bit more productive at telling us how this was going to affect us, or
Right.
they could sniff this was coming, and they
Mhm.
could have told us
Right.
more about the fact that this DEI repeal was going to happen and how that was
Mhm.
going to affect us. So I think that keeping communities engaged and just making sure that you are communicating with the people that are going to be affected by policies, and trying to get as much clarity as possible, because outside of the policy and what we're able to accomplish, I think one of the
Mhm.
biggest goals that I do want to have, with which we're launching, Samantha Green is going to be leading our Operation Connect efforts. Operation
Oh.
Connect is the idea of like how can we repair relationships with student organizations.
Oh, wow.
I think one of the biggest things I heard during the campaign is nobody knows anything about student government,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, that's a big thing, and I remember, something big back with when we had to protest, was the transparency, like transparency with spelled UNC. That page was so instrumental because I was reading through it and I was like, "Wait, this is happening? This is happening? I didn't know that. I'm sure no one else did." And this page, and I always check that page because it's that's great. And I think like transparency is so important because how are we going to know if our voice, which is student government, a student government, and is supposed to be representative of the student body, and they're supposed to speak for us when they get in those big rooms. But on the flip side of that, they're supposed to speak to us. And I think that gets lost a lot because like when are these reports coming out? When are these things coming out? Like, I don't know, maybe even a podcast, like, something like this where you're just telling, students and saying, "Oh, this is what's going on the upper end." Like, and then telling admin or those people that are making decisions what students think, like truly what students think, not just what they think students believe, and I think the DEI thing is a good thing to bring up because I work as external programs coordinator for CEI for Keenan Flagler. So with that being said, that was really scary for us because we were like, are we going to be, out of a job? Because our funding for our organization we weren't exactly sure where it came from. We found out actually it comes from a private donor, so we're okay. But on the flip side of that, Keenan Flagler's like student body is already starting to look different demographically because of these DEI initiatives, and we're trying to figure out what we can do, and it's like nothing, but like we don't, because a lot of times we don't understand what's going on, and we don't understand what's going on the university level. So I think I'm excited to see how your administration handles that because there's so much is changing so fast. It's going to be hard. It's going to be so hard. This is like literally the hardest time probably in the past few years where it's like you're going to be on the forefront, you're going to be on the front lines, and I'm so happy it's you. I'm so happy it's you
thank you,
because
thank you.
it makes me feel better about it. It makes me feel like maybe we're not all screwed, because we have someone speaking for us that's listening, and I really appreciate that a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I think before we did this podcast, I think one of the biggest things that my roommate's part of the Black community. So
Mhm.
so when we were talking about like, well, like how has a DEI repealed really affected like day to day people's lives? I think that
Right.
it's really easy to undermine it. Like, oh, it's
Mhm.
not really affected anything. They just killed
Mhm.
an office, but I
Yeah.
think it's had a broader impact now. The community feels about
Mhm.
each other. One of the biggest examples, I think, it's the um, pit pop-ups that
Yeah.
the Black community has. They definitely went down in terms of frequency and
Mhm.
attendance. And today, I was really really happy to see that there was a lot of energy that I hadn't seen in a
Oh,
while.
yes.
Like
Yes, me too.
like
Me
today,
too.
like I hadn't
Yeah.
seen something like what I saw today
Yeah.
in a really long time.
Yeah.
Frankly, like
For context, Adolfo was talking about Pit Popping Friday, which if you're a UNC student, I'm assuming but basically it's a gathering for like where the Black community all gets together in the pit, in the middle of campus, and they get together and play music and we have a good time and we socialize and talk, and it's just a really nice space for Black students to get together and just mingle and talk and socialize. So that the attendance today was more so like it was when I was a freshman, but I feel like as has gone on, that has started to die out more and more. So it's nice, like that's what Adolfo was referencing, and it's really nice today to see that it was back in popping. It was back how it used to be. So that was really nice to see as well. But yeah.
And so yeah, and finishing with Operation Connect, like I said, Samantha Green will be leading. Samantha Green is the current Black Student Movement president. For
Hmm.
reference,
Hmm.
we are going to work a lot closer with student organizations. We do want to
Yeah.
finally create that a student organizations board of representatives and get together with them every 2 weeks, where we are
Right.
actually opening up the doors of student government to hear their concerns about like the overall student community. Tell them about what we're hearing and
Mhm.
what we are talking about in those rooms and what student government frankly is doing. Trying to funnel down information through organizations. That's the
Right.
easiest way rather than like social media, which is effective, and and
Mhm.
and like newsletters are effective, but
Yeah.
people, sorry, there's nothing more powerful than word of mouth. So we're
Mhm.
trying to use that as much as possible. And for example, in terms of cultural programming,
Mhm.
the executive branch, well, we're adopting a new policy that we're only going to work on cultural programming with cultural organizations. So we are
That's
going to do
yeah.
a lot more collaborations. And I think that for a while, student government has had a great programming effort,
Mhm.
but it's been really isolated programming, like
Right.
running on its own. And
Right.
and not enough people are interested in student government for things to
Mhm.
have that turnout. And
Right.
and we know we do have a standard budget we can use. So
Mhm.
we want to use those resources
Right.
with organizations. So for example, Latino Heritage Month is coming up. So
Right.
Hispanic Heritage Month, and how can we run joint programming with Latinx organizations
Mhm.
to also get the word out about student government and the overall intent. So that's for engagement, and that's a really important part. We want to reconnect student government, and I know that my term won't be enough to do a full reconnection, but how can we lay
Mhm.
the ground
Right.
for a trend to start in which people are more aware about the work that we're doing? So that's one. And then in terms of policy, so I think that there are some definitely key priorities that we are setting. For example, I admire Jilia's meal donation swipe program. I think that
Mm.
that was a really great initiative that
Mhm.
really she really had a nail for it, and she really started nailing all year, and we
Yeah.
finally got it approved. So that
Oh,
yeah,
really?
so
I
it
didn't know
yeah, so
that.
it is going to happen.
Okay,
So
nice.
yeah, so kudos to Julia. She's going to,
Yes.
thanks to
Thank
her,
you,
we're going to have a
Jalea.
meal donation swipe program, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, and so she's also made great progress on the interfaith space. So to have an interfaith space that
Mhm.
that the initiative is like halfway there. So I'll
Mhm.
take over it, and I'll still keep it under my wing in the office of the president.
Yeah.
Some key priorities are I want to get the work going with the Carolina Closet. So
Right.
we are speaking with the university, with career services, and the dean of students to see that one of the highest needs at the university is the lack of resources for some students to afford formal attire, which
Yeah.
is really, really, really necessary. Our peer institution, student government, we've seen how they run this like rental system for formal
Mhm.
attire in which students can check out and check back in clothing
Right.
for their interviews, for their
Yeah.
jobs, for their conferences. and,
Mhm.
and this is one of the biggest class divides that you can see
Right.
at the university.
Yeah.
I think that as food is really expensive, and sometimes you don't have it, and you don't want to
Mhm.
show up underdressed to something. So
Yes, especially
we
professional events. Yeah.
exactly. So we want to get the ball going with that and see how we can consolidate efforts, because student government has had some partial efforts with that. Career
Mhm.
services had some partial efforts with that. So how can we bring everything together to create a real program that
Right.
that supports students? So that's one of them. Some other task forces, we are creating a menstrual equity task force. So
Okay.
we are partnering with Flow Forward to support their efforts to continue
Mhm.
to stock menstrual hygiene
Oh,
menstrual
yeah, yeah, yeah.
hygiene products in on-campus restrooms. We're working
Mhm.
on the policy side of the university that's facing a little bit of challenges.
Yeah.
The university is not as receptive as we would want
Yeah.
about menstrual equity. But it
Mm.
goes back to, well, if we can't do the university side, how can student government support this organization that's working really hard?
Right.
And it's a lot of students that are full-time students, and they are exhausted of also doing the
Uh-huh.
work. So
Yeah.
how can we make sure that student government is there as a resource to support the work that they're doing? So they
Yeah.
did get a grant through the Senate to fund a $47,000
Oh,
grant
nice.
to fund their products. But how can we also support their programming?
Mhm.
How can we have student government also help them with stocking, also help with the inventory? How can we provide them a space to store their products? and
Yeah.
and we're also working on that. Another task force that it's really important is um the housing crisis task force. That
Yes.
the housing crisis is really significant problem. um I think that there has to be short term and longer term advocacy for that. In terms of short term, one of the things that we want to do is increase involvement or have student involvement in the hardship housing application that Carolina
Mhm.
Housing runs. There is a
Okay,
hardship
yeah.
housing
Yeah, yeah,
application.
yeah.
However, there's very little transparency as to what really the university is accepting as hardship. I think it's a really
Mhm.
legal line whether the university is
Yeah.
required to comply or not with your request. It's
Mhm.
not really understanding, and it goes back to the idea of um, how can we how can we ensure student representations there? Because student voices are really important. Goes back to the honor code, which we'll touch in a second.
Right.
But yeah, so that's another one, and the other one is the STEM quality of life. So the quality
Mm.
of life for STEM students. We an issue that we've seen and we can't just ignore is that
Right.
STEM students are disproportionately affected by mental health challenges at the
Mhm.
university, and then that
Mhm.
that goes back to a lot of challenges, including lack of resources, without
Right.
classes. We've seen departments being completely evil and ruthless to students in
Mhm.
academic settings just to get them to drop the major, which
Right.
in a lot of cases it regrettably ends up being successful. The
Yeah.
university
Yeah,
wants
yeah,
students
yeah.
to drop, and we are having 500 more students in the upcoming class. The enrollment's going up by
Mm.
500 next year, with a goal for the university to have 5,000 more students in 10 years. So the university is increasing enrollment when we are
Mm.
already really packed, when it's
Yeah.
already really hard to get core classes, when people are already struggling to afford housing and find on campus housing. So some dorms that did not used to be first year dorms will now be first year dorms next year. So the university is expanding first year access to housing, and they're also considering to expand scheduling for classes. We're unsure what that looks like quite yet,
Yeah.
but I know that the university would probably not get rid of the idea of having weekend classes, or
Yeah.
how can we continue to provide operations, which is it's a little hard because we're
Yeah.
already struggling, I think, as it is to pack certain majors. I think STEM is one of the example.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are going to come in as STEM students, and the university has already tried to make an effort to reduce the STEM enrollment. With our classes are a perfect example of
Yeah.
that. So
I don't uh, hmm. I knew that, like, the expansion of enrollment piece, and what I don't understand about that is it seems like the university wants to enroll more students, but they don't want to expand the services or the bare minimum requirements that a university provides to their students. It seems like they don't want to expand those services and the things that we need as students to be functioning college students. And as not to push it back to Keenan Flagler, but one thing I will say, like, as someone who is really involved in that community, I think Keenan Flagler does a very good job of that, because in response to the university wide increasing enrollment, Keenan Flagler pretty much funded on its own a brand new business school that's going to be complete next year, in September, or this year in September, to be functioning in first semester 2026, so spring semester 2026, and that's going to allow for, like, double the amount of students to be able to be a business major, because a big issue right now, like you said, with STEM is there's not much opportunity for people to actually become business majors because of the rigor of the application and the, like, how selective they must be because of the facilities they have to offer. But they're responding to that with, Keenan Flagler is responding to that with their own money, building a new business school to provide those facilities and services for new students. On the flip side of that, I don't really see where that's happening with the university, because the university is admitting these new students. Where are the new dorms coming from? Because there's already a housing crisis. There's already a shortage of housing. What is what's the remedy for that? How can you admit you know what I mean? Like, how can you admit new students but then not expand the university itself, or expand, the things that students need if you're going to add students? That's kind of like my quarrel with that.
and I think that there is this. It's a really important point, because I think that there are multiple factors to play into
Mhm.
into into a truth, that is that the university is affording to sorry, the university is struggling to afford itself.
Right.
So that's a truth. We do
Yeah.
have a very competitive tuition.
Mhm.
The board of governors approved that tuition will be frozen for the ninth year in a row. So for 9 years, we have not had
Mm.
any increase in tuition, and we are the number one value public university in the country.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
compared to UCs, compared to U Michigan,
Mhm.
UVA, like our in-state tuition is um, incredibly smaller,
Right.
and it's a lot more affordable. So that's
Mhm.
really great. However, that also comes with the lack of the university to be able to increase operations, because
Right.
money is not going up, but prices are.
Mhm.
So when I was at the board of trustees meeting, Trustee Jennifer Lloyd, she brought up a really good point when there was a discussion about tuition, and she said, "Well, I do believe that tuition should go up with an inflation a small increase every
Yes.
year, not
Hmm.
ridiculous. We shouldn't
Yeah.
double it, but it should go up every year. And I think that that's something that most trustees do not agree with, or the board of governors does not agree with. Out
Right.
of state tuition has been going up exponentially. It's
Hmm.
going up at a very, 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 very fast rate. But I think that that's a really important thing to know, that at a state level,
Hmm.
it is a very controversial topic. Most North Carolina citizens oppose an increase to tuition, so that's
Right.
probably not going to happen.
Right.
What goes back to the university is really struggling to continue to afford itself. Which, research, for example, research funding is going to be cut at the university by
Mm.
at least $125 million with
Wow.
what the Trump administration is
Yeah.
is making cuts with NIH funding. Sorry, so
Hmm.
that's also going to affect research operations at the
Hmm.
university. And research make rankings. That's
Right.
a really important thing to note.
Definitely.
Research
Yeah.
is one of the main components of university rankings. So
Hmm.
I think that it's really interesting, and it's going to be really interesting to see what the university budgetary approach to changes that are already being affecting research, and on the other side, like there's not any significant increase of money coming in, but the
Right.
costs of the university to be able to afford itself are going up really exponentially. And here is where I do want to be pro students. Here's where
Hmm.
I've told people that I want to be pro students. I think that next time that the board of trustees meets, and I am a member, during closed sessions, sometimes there's discussions about budgetary things where
Yeah.
people have to vote and express their concerns about. So
Hmm.
um, I think I said this during the campaign, but for example, next time that the university um, is trying to encourage a school of civic life and leadership professor to be hired over market value,
Right.
I think that's where the student body president has to come in and say, hey,
Hmm.
I think this is a great idea, but there are other things that students
Right.
want to see happen, and there are other students
Right.
that students want to see this money going towards, for example, university facility operations. I think
Hmm.
that's one of the most important ones. Trying to advocate for the 24/7 hour library
Yeah.
to be back, but that also has to come with fair workers, right? So
Hmm.
we're not just going to take a deal that's going to affect workers,
Right.
because that was a whole discussion with the UNC workers union. How
Hmm.
can we advocate for both sides? I think that a lot of classrooms are falling apart. That's
Yes.
also a really important
Yes.
important thing to note. CAPS needs more resources, and campus
Hmm.
health as a whole. I think that there has to be a lot more funding allocated towards mental health resources. So
But
how
then
can
on
we?
the flip side, it's like, where is this money coming from? But then also, how do you balance like all of this, like all of the facilities, all of the services that we're talking about right now ties into the quality of life of students. And I think that's what kind of can get from the board's perspective. I think since they're not like that's why your role is so important, since they're not living it, they don't understand what it's like to be a student at UNC truly. And I think that's why your role is so crucial and why I do believe in you so much. I think you can articulate that to them like in an effective way because like the quality of life piece I think is what needs to be understood better. So that when these plans are made and these goals are made and these metrics are thrown out there like you said, increasing enrollment by a certain number in 10 years, like how do you you can set these metrics, but the critical thinking and the true work needs to come in maintaining a certain the real metric should be the quality of life that is being maintained for our students. And then you worry about those goals and then you worry about the overarching thing. But the real thing and the real job of that board is to be there for us. And I think, and that's why I'm so excited for you to be our senior body president, because I think you can truly make that known and make that something is brought to the forefront because at the end of the day, yes, a university is a business. I understand that more than anyone. However, the interesting thing about this business is how it's tied to the daily lives of its consumers. That's the
Exactly,
difference.
and I think that that's something that the board seems to often struggle to understand, that
Mhm.
students make the university ultimately.
Exactly.
Ultimately students make the university. So I would love to take the board of trustees on a tour around Phillips, for example, and see the status of our
Yeah.
facilities in Phillips, and I
Mhm.
would love to really show them what the other side, what being on the other side of
Right.
this Carolina excellence can look like. I think there are
Mhm.
amazing things at the university, but there are
Mhm.
also a lot of things that need a lot of work. Another one, graduate stipends. I think
Yeah.
that um, our teaching assistants are being forced to live off a stipend of $21,000 a
Yeah.
year. $21,000 for full-time research and full-time
Hmm.
teaching. And, there's also other concerns that it's not just stipends.
Yeah.
Excuse absences, for example. If you have COVID, you are required to go to class.
Yeah.
And as much as that's a risk for a student, it's also a risk for our TAs and professors, for
Yeah.
our peers. It's a health hazard, and it's putting
Hmm.
people at risk. So how can we get the university to understand these things? So
Yeah.
I think there's a really clear thing. I'm not anti-administration, but I am pro students, and I will stand
Exactly.
up for the student body. I think that goes back to, I think that when you're not in this position for something personally, you're not gonna be scared to step up for students. I think that
Hmm.
they might not always like your voice, and they
Hmm.
might just see you as someone who's putting weight on them. But
Right.
that's what I was elected at the end.
Yeah.
We only have one seat. There's
Exactly.
32,000 of us, and in that board there are 15 members, and there's
Right.
only one student seat. So I think
Which
that
within itself, when you put that number out there, what? You know what I mean? Like, and and then on top of that, like you said, 32,000, we are paying to be here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're all putting like our money into this university because we want to be here. And then, like you said, like we get that one seat. And that's why, people will say like student government isn't important or things like that. It's so important. It's one of the most important things about our university because if we don't have effective student government, everything for each student falls apart. All of these things that you're talking about, all of these things that you're working toward is going to affect our everyday lives as UNC students. And I think people need to understand that and people need to take it more serious. And then also, even if it doesn't affect you, maybe you're a very privileged student and these things don't affect you. Well, think about the people that it does affect. Think about the people that come after you. Think about all these things. And, once you do that, it's like and you still don't care, that's crazy because it's just so vital. And if you really truly care about our university, then you'll care about these issues.
and
Definitely.
I think that's the main thing. And I think goes back to opening up the doors of student government.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a lot more transparent about what I'm saying in the board of trustees.
Mm-hmm.
I released a statement when I met with the chancellor to talk about what I talked
Right.
to him about, and
Mm-hmm.
what our conversation was about, and what he told me about certain university issues. So
Yeah.
how can we be more transparent about what is the student body president advocating for?
Right.
What has he heard back from that? Like, where
Mm-hmm.
is the work? I think that the idea that student government doesn't do anything is not rooted in the fact that that it's not doing anything, and it's rooted in
Yeah.
the fact that people don't know what it's doing.
Right.
If people are more informed, at least they'll know that people are fighting. People
Exactly.
understand how difficult of a system the
Mm-hmm.
university is in.
So
it's
complex.
it's a
Yeah.
bureaucratic system at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day. It's really easy to be shut down. So I think that opening up the doors and just like being more transparent and clear. For example, we are partnering with the Daily Tar Heel to have a liaison from DTH covering more and more about student government. Having press briefings with them and meeting more about the work that we are doing. So I think
Right.
that we're trying to open up the doors for that. The honor court, for example, is a perfect example. The honor system being abolished, we are now fully supporting
Yeah.
a new student organization called the Student Advocacy Network. So
Okay.
the Student Advocacy Network is kind of like, think about it as a legal clinic. It's like
Mm.
a group of students who want to represent students in the new honor system.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
yeah, but
Wow.
if you know about the new system, the difference is that before the evidence had to prove that you were 80% guilty. So there had to be 80% of
Mm.
evidence would have to lean
Point to
towards the
you.
fact that
Okay.
you're guilty. Now it is 51%. So the new system is really punitive on students. Like
Wow.
it does not feel like it's meant to support values and
Yeah.
uphold principles, but rather to have students fail through a system
And
that just
this
proves
came
that.
from where did this what
The
what
new
did
honor system is with the administration. Like after
I
the
thought
honor
so.
corps was abolished, like the new system, the new staff-led system is going to be like this. So it's
Mm.
it's difficult because student representation is really important,
Yeah.
and we cannot get the honor system back. That's a truth that it's very regrettably
Yeah.
accepted, and something
Yeah.
that's really sad to accept. But again,
Mhm.
part of being on this job is also being honest.
Exactly.
Like how can we accept that these things are going to happen and they're not gonna be changed? Like no
Right.
matter what, how much we storm, no matter how much we scream, no matter
Mhm.
how many letters I send or meetings I have, like it's not going to change. So how can
Right.
we move on from here? And I think that the Student Advocacy Network is a great resource that I am really happy to support.
Mhm.
And our student government will have meaningful conversations with the administration to continue
Yeah.
to let the university to sponsor this organization
Mhm.
to show that in the new system, the university does in some way want students to succeed. Like,
Right.
there is this group of students who want to offer free advising and free representation for
Mhm.
students in accusations. So we want to encourage the university to show that this resource is there for people who are accused of violations. Kind of like a
Right.
don't hide that there is student
Yeah.
representation, but encourage it. I think
Mhm.
that you took away the honor system. Well, then shows that you at least care about students still being involved in the process meaningfully, and representation is gonna be the most important way.
Right. And not just condemning students immediately, especially considering the gazillion other things we have going on. But I guess to wrap us up, is there something you would want to leave everyone with? Like, considering the fact that now you're our president, you're our student body president, beginning April
April
1st,
1st.
April 1st, stepping into this role and in this transition and into your role, like, is there something you would like to say? Like, just something you would want to leave everyone with stepping into your presidency?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, it is an honor to be the first Latino student body president in the university's history. I think disappointed it took so long,
Mm-hmm.
but really happy. I think in times like this, it means a lot that
Mm-hmm.
that it's happening. With everything going on immigration wise and the attack on the Latinx community and everyone
Yeah.
who is frankly in diverse in some way. I think that it's really really important. So
Yeah.
so there's that point. I think that I am getting a life lesson out of this whole campaign and transition team, this transition timeline and everything. And I guess that when people tell you you cannot do something and
Mm.
you won't be able to do something, I think that you should always take it as an encouragement to try
Yeah.
harder. I
Yeah.
was an outsider and I came outside of the student government and
Right.
some people would always say that I was like not qualified or that I was
Mm.
incapable for the job or that I
Mm-hmm.
was just not prepared and I was never going to win, that there was no way that some random dude would become student body president.
Yeah.
And I think that um we ended a trend that showed that, well, you need to have this experience to be student body president. I think you need to have the passion, you need to
Right.
have the care to represent the student body.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the workers union,
Mm-hmm.
we were the first campaign that has ever been endorsed by the UNC workers union, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it meant a lot because we built a relationship with them
Yeah.
throughout the campaign period, and
Mm-hmm.
we kind of went a different route. I think
Right.
that sometimes when the administration doesn't like an organization, as a student government, it's really easy to be like, well, we shouldn't be talking to them because
Right.
the administration doesn't like them, and I think that I
Right.
wanted to take the route of like, if the administration doesn't like them, then you should be paying even more attention to
Right.
them
Because
because
why
there's a
is that?
reason. There's a
Mm-hmm.
reason why they are not liked by the system.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that I'm really excited for this term. We're gonna take office April 1st. The first weeks are gonna be like getting into the office,
Right.
recruitment, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of like finishing
Mm-hmm.
that, laying out the ground for what's coming. So,
Yeah.
pretty much, I think like in May we're going to take off, and over the summer do a lot of planning for the fall, which is
Right.
when we come back in person and campus kind of like wakes up and has this life again, and that's when we want to push for more initiatives. We're
Right.
excited to appoint our cabinet
Mm-hmm.
and just bear with us as we
Yeah.
try to make restructures. We're
Yeah.
making adjustments. We're introducing the Department of Basic Needs, so we're
Mm-hmm.
really excited about that department. How can we better advocate for the needs that matter the most
Mm-hmm.
to the student body? I'm going to have open hours.
Oh,
Teddy
nice.
Van was the last president that had open office hours. We're bringing
Just saw
that
her
back.
yesterday. I
Yeah,
love her.
we're bringing
So
that
sweet.
back. So
Yeah.
she used to call them TED Talks.
Oh, yes.
So
Yes.
she
Yes.
had a
Yes.
really creative name for it. I don't have a creative name for it. We're just
Mm-hmm.
gonna be like open hours.
Yeah.
But we do want to open up the doors a little bit more, and I'm really excited to see what that looks like. And in times where protections are rolled back, and in times where I know people have fear and people
Yeah.
are frankly really sad and defeated, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't blame them.
Yeah.
I am going to stand up for the student body. I'm gonna aim to go into those rooms and truly be pro students. I'm not
Right.
anti anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I am pro students, and I think
Exactly.
that that's ultimately what I want people to know that, I see my peers and I see what everyone's struggling with. And then I'm
Mhm.
also just another student. I think
Yeah.
that when you're a student body president, it's really easy to put on a suit and being it's like, oh, I am the leader of the people.
Right.
Like I am the boss of the
Mhm.
people. But I am also just another student.
Right.
I'm a guy with an orange cat. Like, outside
Yeah.
outside of that, I'm just another Tar Heel.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that I'm entrusted with this. But I really do want to, when I've said I bring results, it's not just like programs and policies, but results is also like representation. And I think that it matters more than ever now.
Mhm.
So yeah, but thank you for having me. It's been great.
Of course, and thank you so much for coming on. Once again, it's such an honor to have you here, and it was so amazing to speak with you about, your administration, your plans for our university. It's always just great to kind of shine a light into student government and, like you said, open those doors up for people to hear what's really going on. So I am so appreciative of that. Thank you so much for being here. I would love to do this again, once we're in the thick of it and you are, actually making those adjustments and doing those initiatives, and we can hear about like the live what's going on. That would be amazing. But yes, once again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of COR Meets World. Bye, guys.
Well, thank you.